A delicate but significant disagreement is developing within the realm of royalty. The title of Queen Camilla has caused Princess Anne, who is notoriously traditional, to express her disapproval. The strong disagreements that exist behind palace doors have been exposed by her position, which has put King Charles in a precarious position. Considering the lack of royal precedent, should Camilla's title be changed? Does Anne's descent reveal a deeper power struggle within the royal family? What does this signify for the delicate power dynamic in the royal palace? Buckingham Palace felt weighty with the talk rumbling away behind closed doors. This was no ordinary business meeting among the highest-ranking members of the royal family. Nonetheless, the stakes were higher than usual. Princess Anne, known for her unwavering dedication to her royal responsibilities, had just made a statement that made quite a stir in the room. You could feel the stress. The remarks clearly touched a nerve with the audience. It was more than just a matter of protocol, it was a deeply personal issue, and Queen Camilla did her best to keep her cool while sitting next to King Charles. For a long time, Anne had proven herself to be the most dependable and hard-working member of the royal family. Never one to allow her feelings cloud her judgment, she always put the needs of the company she worked for first. And had remained unwavering, following the traditions that had shaped the royal family for generations, while others had been swept away by the ebb and flow of public opinion. Even by her own standards, this was a risky move. Evidently unnerved by her position, Camilla had publicly opposed a decision that might determine the monarchy's fate. No one outside of the royal family saw Anne's direct challenge to Camilla's position coming. True, Camilla had spent a great deal of time and effort building her reputation. After decades of scrutiny, continual comparisons to Princess Diana, and public mistrust, she and Charles were ultimately crowned together. For many, this was the final step in her rise from royal outsider to beloved family member. To be sure, not everyone felt this way. Instead of being passed down by marriage or inherited, titles were earned through effort, duty, and unfaltering devotion to the monarchy, as Anne explains. And that fact ought to be considered in Camilla's function, says Anne. Although that day's discussion did not involve the public at large, it did not stay inside the confines of Buckingham Palace, as is customary for matters pertaining to the royal family. There was immediate speculation that Camilla's formal status and the responsibilities that came with it had caused a schism among the senior royal family. How involved Anne was in the conversation was a topic of significant speculation. Reportedly, she had strongly objected to the original idea to elevate Camilla's rank. Not everything was based on tradition. Ensuring the monarchy remained an institution founded on duty rather than personal preference was the main objective. Looking at Anne's background made it clear why she would take such a stand. Throughout her life, she has served as a pillar of stability for the royal family. And had just kept going. As her younger cousins and siblings were constantly caught up in scandals, feuds, or struggled with the rigors of royal life. She had done thousands of engagements, represented the monarchy at international conferences, and kept going long after most people would have retired. She had always been self-controlled and had never sought recognition. And saw her position as more of a responsibility than an honor as a member of the royal family. Yet Camilla had gone in an entirely different direction. Her romance with Charles was one of the most tumultuous in modern royal history. After their affair became known, she was constantly monitored. The road to acceptance has been difficult even after marrying Charles in 2000. Despite the fact that her popularity had grown, particularly in the years leading up to Queen Elizabeth's passing, there were still many who saw her as an alien. Concerning Anne's feelings for Camilla, it was irrelevant. It was not apparent whether she was truly suited for the task that had been allocated to her. The late Queen Elizabeth had intended for Camilla to be named Queen Consort, which separated her from other reigning monarchs and emphasized her position as the king's wife. This decision had been deliberated in order to find a middle ground between tradition and the genuine bond between Charles and Camilla. There were, however, some whispered discussions in the months leading up to the coronation over whether or not Camilla should simply be called Queen. For many, this was just a formality. After all, she was already known as Queen Camilla by the majority of people. Nonetheless, Anne perceived it as a philosophical matter rather than a matter of language. The discussion at Buckingham Palace had shown the family's differences. Supporters of Camilla's full royal status said that she deserved the title due to her long loyalty to Charles. They highlighted her numerous royal duties, charitable contributions, and composure under intense public scrutiny. They viewed her role's formalization as a simple acknowledgement of an existing reality. On the other hand, Anne had a unique viewpoint. She believed that the monarchy had always been based on a feeling of obligation that went beyond formal titles and public personas. Working hard after receiving a title, in her view, was not enough. To earn the honor, one had to prove themselves worthy of the position. And did not think tradition should be bent to accommodate unique cases like Camilla's unconventional entrance into the royal family. Some thought her stance was rigid, but for Anne, it was about protecting the reputation of the group she had devoted her life to. It became increasingly clear to everyone in the room that Anne truly believed what she was saying as the conversation went on. It was not out of spite or personal enmity that she voiced these concerns, rather, it was as someone who had spent her whole life upholding the principles of the monarchy. Even though Camilla pretended not to be nervous, the look of pure terror in her eyes told it everything. Overcoming the stigma of her background and proving her belonging were battles she had fought for years in order to be accepted. Even after she finally achieved the position she had long advocated for by standing by Charles's side, her worth was still being cast into doubt. King Charles, also a diplomat, attempted to defuse the situation as well. Now that he was king after years of waiting, he wanted his family to be stable. His whole life had been spent balancing the needs of tradition with the truths of change, so he understood Anne's concerns. Nevertheless, he was also cognizant of Camilla's struggles and the selflessness she had displayed in her support of him. He was concerned that the family might split up soon after he became king. But Anne was never the type to reconsider her decisions once she made them. To those closest to her, it was obvious that feeling would have no effect on her. In her mind, the decision had already been taken. Nothing further could be said. She had been forthright. As the discussion continued, Camilla remained silent. She had long since learned that the royal family rarely showed their emotions in the heat of the moment. On the other hand, Anne's closest associates would later assert that her role was pivotal. This was an exception to her usual pattern of guarded vulnerability. This time, the rejection hit close to home. The meeting may have ended, but Anne's comments would reverberate long after the Buckingham Palace doors had closed. Even if the general population was unaware of all that transpired that day, they might feel the resulting tension. For decades to come, this tragedy would mold the dynamics of the royal family. It also served as a timely reminder to Camilla that not everyone shared her confidence in her ability to fit in, even if she had made great strides. As time passed, speculation about the words spoken behind the palace doors grew. Despite public displays of unity among the royal family, whispers of Anne's disdain continued. In addition, although some recognized her stance as a crucial preservation of tradition, others wondered if her unwavering commitment to duty had compromised her compassion. But there was absolute certainty for Anne. She had acted in a way that she believed was right. Plus, she definitely wouldn't be rethinking it. Tensions persisted following the conclusion of the discussion at Buckingham Palace. As the doors shut behind them, the older members of the royal family dispersed, each to his or her own thoughts. As they waited for the matter to be resolved, some remained impartial. Some tried to find a way to close the gap, like King Charles. Nonetheless, Anne and Camilla still had a lot to talk about. And had a reputation for saying exactly what she meant. For her, it had never been about feelings of animosity or sentimentality. Keeping traditions alive in a society where everything was changing so rapidly was the principal concern of the monarchy. The importance of responsibility over individual circumstances and the need for uniformity within the organization were always deeply ingrained in her mind. Having held this belief to be true her whole life, it guided her in meeting her responsibilities. As the dispute over Camilla's title escalated, she felt obligated to bring attention to the concerns by reminding the family of them. At the same time, Camilla was battling emotions that she had learned to bury. Over the years, she has been the focus of scrutiny from the media, the general public, and even members of the royal family who distrust her. She had worked tirelessly to alter public opinion, to prove that she was indeed the scandal-plagued woman who had also vowed to fulfill the duties befitting a princess. Maybe naively, she thought the ambiguity of her position would have faded by the time she and Charles were crowned queens. Still, she ran into opposition from inside her own family. And was worried about Camilla's status in the royal family, as she had been before. Their long history of differing opinions on royal duty and other subtle forms of formality had shaped their relationship, which had never been too affectionate. Throughout her life, Anne had adhered to a system of clear rules that dictated the behavior, service, and expectations of royals. The unconventional way Camilla had become a member of the royal family was important to Anne. Even before Camilla and Charles tied the knot, they'd been dating for decades. Anne and Camilla had already intersected at aristocratic gatherings and found themselves entangled in the same social circles. Andrew Parker Bowles, who would later become Camilla's first husband, had also been quite close to Anne. Even though Anne and him had never had a very serious relationship, it was a reminder of how intimately their lives had been intertwined long before Camilla became a princess. Anne had witnessed firsthand the royal family's struggle to contain the fallout from the affair between Charles and Camilla. This had a devastating effect on the royal family's credibility. Anne, who had devoted her life to protecting the dignity of the institution, saw the controversy as another threat to the monarchy's stability. Many felt the damage had been done, even though Charles and Camilla were married in the end. Although Anne maintained her formal neutrality, those close to her knew that she had long questioned Camilla's capacity to handle the weight of duty that came with being a member of the royal family. Even after the wedding, Anne kept her distance a little. Neither open hostility nor an attempt to cast doubt on Camilla's credibility were present. Anne was reserved, focused, and not one to give up tradition for practicality. That was simply her nature. As a counterpoint, Camilla had worked to strengthen familial ties. Although he had been one of her most vocal detractors in the past, she had grown quite close to Charles's sons, particularly Prince William. Her unwavering loyalty to the monarchy and her encouragement of Charles had earned her his respect over time. The relationship with Anne, though, had always been more official. Those disagreements had just come up again in the discussions around the coronation. In contrast to the wives of earlier monarchs, Anne had made it clear that she did not believe Camilla deserved the title of queen. Queen Elizabeth II had set an example in Anne's view when she named Camilla Queen Consort, a title that paid homage to tradition while acknowledging Camilla's role. Anne thought it was unnecessary to remove the distinction and worried it would set a precedent where titles might be modified for personal reasons rather than following royal tradition. For Charles, the dispute had deep personal and political roots. For a long time, he had battled for his wife's acceptance. Seeing as people's perceptions of her shift over time. Camilla had worked very hard to become a dedicated royal. He knew she had accepted engagements, donated to charity, and remained calm under fire. However, he was cognizant of the fact that his position was not shared by every member of the family. He had always respected Anne's unwavering commitment to her responsibilities, even when it conflicted with his own desires. The conflict, however, took a more intimate turn this time. As well as her position and status within the royal family were affected. Camilla preferred to stay out of the spotlight in the event of another quarrel. The more she worked, the more she realized that she should let other people tell the story. But this time, something was different. The fact that she had previously begun to carry out the responsibilities of a queen should surely be reflected in her title. The difference between queen and queen consort, in her opinion, was unnecessary. For the simple reason that she knew that many people, particularly in the media, had already referred to her as Queen Camilla. To Anne, though, that distinction was crucial. Those two people continued to argue after that one conversation. Even in the weeks following, Camilla's behavior, carefully worded press releases, and private conversations all hinted to its persistence. Despite the lack of a formal decision, those familiar with the two ladies could sense the underlying tension. The public has no idea about most of this. On the outside, the royal family seemed to be united. They attended social gatherings as a unit, maintained the cordial exterior upon which the monarchy rested, and exchanged courteous smiles. But behind the scenes, the dispute continued to simmer. Nothing Anne said had been intended to provoke an argument. What she believed to be right was only spoken by her. The truth of what had been spoken continued to trouble Camilla, even though she would never approach her directly. It was a sobering reminder that her reign as queen was far from over. Royal authority has traditionally rested on the principles of precedent and continuity. No changes were made in a hurry or without giving them careful consideration. However, while the argument continued within the royal walls, one thing became clear. The battle has just begun. Camilla was still left with the question. No matter how much she achieved, would the royal family ever treat her with respect? The strain that Buckingham Palace had been undercoverly building up was finally beginning to show. The royal family put on an air of tranquility, but whispers of strife never died down. Reports of divergent opinions on Queen Camilla's title stoked the fires of speculation as to what had really happened behind closed doors. The monarchy, which had historically served as a means of control, almost never made public internal disputes. It was evident that Camilla's perspective was not shared by all family members. It might have seemed like a fruitless debate from the outside. The anointing and execution of queenly duties have already been completed by Camilla and Charles. But this was about more than simply a title for Princess Anne. It pertained to the foundation of the kingship. The significance of tradition, in her opinion, could not be discounted solely because of the passage of time. During all her life, she had worked to maintain the principles that had guided the king and queen for countless years. It was clear that Anne had influence within the royal family, despite the fact that she had never been involved in public disagreements or power struggles. Her unwavering commitment earned her the admiration of her colleagues and proved that service was all about taking responsibility, not about seeking one's own gain. What set her apart from many of her relatives was her unwavering commitment to this principle. Yet as the discussions over Camilla's function progressed, it became clear that Anne's viewpoint was significant, regardless of its acceptance. The situation that Camilla had thought would be fixed was actually becoming worse for her. It had taken her years of trying, but she finally succeeded in winning over the royal family and the public. After years of playing the antagonist in one of the most infamous royal sagas of our time, she finally stood up to the relentless media scrutiny and proved that she was more than just a background character. The moment she was crowned, firmly established in her place within the monarchy, she believed she had reached the zenith of her journey. But now that Anne's opposition was showing, she started to question whether that acceptance had actually been offered. Since King Charles had a keen eye for the family's delicate balance, he found himself in an uncomfortable position. After what felt like an eternity on the verge of becoming king, he yearned for harmony rather than strife. He understood his sister's concerns because Anne had always been the one to safeguard royal tradition and faithfully follow their late mother's values. Nonetheless, he realized Camilla was also irritated. Even though she had promised to help him through his years of doubt and dedicated herself to her expected position, she still faced suspicion from the very group she had sworn to serve. However, in Anne's perspective, this was unrelated to her social circle. The objective was to preserve the monarchy as an institution that is guided by principles rather than caprices. She had seen firsthand the rapidity with which public opinion might shift and the resilience of the royal family in the face of scandal and controversy. Concerned about the future of the monarchy, she awaited Camilla's coronation with trepidation. Discordant with her emotions back then. While royal disputes were typically kept under wraps, the debate about Camilla's title was beginning to gain traction in the public eye. Speculation among royal watchers and media outlets centered on the impact of Anne's position on Charles's decision. Some thought of her as someone who stood firm against tradition and innovation. Some wondered if her rigidity had become stale. Regardless of the perspective, one thing was assured. This issue would not resolve itself automatically. The value of silence was something Camilla had realized a long time ago. She had avoided public responses to criticism for years, waiting for the story to be shaped by time. But this time, something was different. At stake this time was not the approval of the public at large, but rather her own family. And she was well aware that it would be significantly more challenging. The Queen kept her cool and kept attending royal functions as usual, unfazed by the continuing talks. But those who looked closely could see that something was different. She had always been careful to avoid making any embarrassing faces for the cameras or reporters. Nevertheless, there were instances where the stress was noticeable, though they were brief and unnoticeable. But with Anne, it was business as usual. Unconcerned by the rumors that were spreading concerning her status, she carried on with her usual duties. She considered responsibility, not popular opinion, to be at the heart of the matter. No amount of popular sentiment or opinion could sway her. There would be no turning back now that she had spoken her mind. Now Charles needed to find out what to do so as not to exacerbate the situation. His faith in Anne's counsel had never wavered, and he admired her ability to keep her cool under pressure. But this time, something was different. This had nothing to do with policy or precedent and everything to do with his wife. Furthermore, he could not afford to disregard the seriousness of what that suggested. Years of change and countless fights have not deterred the monarchy. This issue wouldn't damage it. But there was still one worry as the simmering tensions continued to boil over. Anne and Camilla might be able to make up. Alternatively, might their separation be destined to last for many years? Behind the lavish palace walls, tensions would often boil over, despite the royal family's best efforts to appear united in public. Even after the controversy around Camilla's title subsided, tensions persisted at Buckingham Palace. No official remarks were made, and the royal family carried on with their customary duties as monarchs, but onlookers could discern a shift. For Camilla, the conversation was a burden. Her usual resilience in the face of criticism and speculation was on display here. She had believed that her long fight for acceptance within the royal family was finally ended now that she was queen. Nevertheless, the fact that Anne remained resistant showed that several questions remained unresolved. She had faced resistance in the past, but this time it originated within herself, coming from an assuredly strong voice. And, on the other hand, was still not convinced. She believed she had made her position clear, therefore there was no need to bring it up again. Her schedule was still jam-packed, and her dedication to royal duties had not wavered. For decades, she had been an unwavering supporter of the monarchy and was renowned as its most diligent member. While her relatives fought against public perception and proceeded unconcerned and kept moving on. This place was no different. She had spoken up not because she hated Camilla but because she thought the monarchy should remain intact no matter what. Finding a happy medium between the two was King Charles's responsibility. From the beginning, he had revered and for her unwavering commitment to the organization, relied on her counsel, and put his faith in her intuition. Nevertheless, this time the matter was really personal. He had spent years preparing Camilla to be queen alongside him, as she was more than simply a royal family member. He had spent years waiting to become king, and now she was his wife. Now that Anne was firm, he had to decide whether to be loyal to his sister or protect the woman who had been his best friend. The significance of the title's underlying meaning was the central point of the argument. Persons with a lifelong commitment to the monarchy and an upbringing that emphasizes the significance of the crown, such as Queen Elizabeth II, have always been associated with the position of queen. Some people still felt that tradition shouldn't be changed so quickly, even though many people appreciated Camilla for her innovative trip. To Anne, it was of the utmost importance that those holding these posts truly embodied the values of the monarchy. Charles, on the other hand, was just concerned with giving his wife the recognition he believed she deserved. In light of the private disagreements, the royal family could not have backed down. Camilla continued to fulfill her royal duties, attending events alongside Charles while maintaining the poise and refinement expected of her at all times. She was just like Anne in that she remained dedicated to her job and never let her private life interfere with it. The schism, however, remained subtle yet easily identifiable. Throughout their conversation, the public was made aware of the growing speculation about Camilla's involvement, and royal analysts were watching every interaction between the ladies with great interest. It was thought that Anne was the one who would protect royal tradition and keep the monarchy loyal to its origins. Some people felt her stance was very rigid, and they wondered if her commitment to duty had compromised her judgment. On the flip side, there were many who felt bad for Camilla since, in their minds, she had done nothing wrong and was still being passed over. Even inside the palace, opinions varied. In a subtle but significant way, senior courtiers who believed the title of queen had historical significance and should not be altered supported Anne's position. Although some were in favor of Charles, others said that Camilla had proven her worth and that the title of queen should not be differentiated from queen because the monarchy had always been slow to change and unwilling to depart from tradition. But now everything was different, and the royal family had to adapt to new expectations. The question was whether the people working for the organization could change, or if they would return to their old ways. For Anne, there was no conundrum. No need to alter the monarchy, which she had dedicated her life to upholding, in her view. She was unfeeling and had never allowed her emotions to cloud her judgment. This was about the proper meaning of the title of queen, not about Camilla personally, in her view. However, Camilla could not separate the issue from the feelings it evoked. Despite her achievements and the strides she had taken, she was reminded that she could never be sure of acceptance inside the royal family. She smiled for the cameras and carried out her duties with the proper politeness, but the doubts remained. It would also be over soon. Much bloodier conflicts have not deposed the monarchy. Anne and Camilla continued with their respective responsibilities, occasionally crossing paths in formal settings, so it was clear that this conversation was far from over. Some arguments may fade from memory, while others have left permanent scars. Even in the silent moments between their public appearances, when neither of them spoke, the significance of what had been stated during that clandestine meeting at Buckingham Palace lingered. Generations of scrutiny had allowed the royal family to perfect the skill of mending fences within while maintaining unity. But little details often exposed the latent problems, even though they tried to regulate their public relations. Neither the ease nor the resolution of the matter of Queen Camilla's title could be achieved in a single meeting. This was a meeting point of the past and the present because the monarchy was a precedent-based institution. There was little room for negotiation from Anne's perspective. She had devoted her life to upholding the values instilled in her by her parents, carrying on the traditions that had guided the royal family through its numerous changes. She was never one to publicly reject modernism, but she stuck by the principles that had kept the monarchy together. Queen was more than simply a title to her, it was a symbol of the utmost degree of duty and devotion. Not only that, but she thought it was disrespectful to bestow that status on someone who hadn't grown up in the institution or been groomed for it all her life. Camilla could see Anne's point of view, even if she disagreed with it. She never dreamed that everyone in the royal family would accept her or that she would enjoy everyone's approval. People would constantly question her credibility due to her history with Charles, regardless of the passage of time. But after all her hard work over the years, she had assumed that the struggle for acknowledgement had been won by this point. She was instead compelled to prove her belongingness again. They were amicable and didn't openly show signs of discontent. Their behavior was consistent with the norm, they attended royal engagements as a unit and were cordial to one another in times of need. Though Camilla maintained her usual air of refined sophistication, she seemed more reserved and careful around Anne, which was noticeable to those with an ear for subtle cues. Meanwhile, Anne remained calm and collected throughout, her demeanor betraying no indication that she was considering changing her mind. King Charles tried to find a middle ground when he had to choose between his sister and his bride. Anne was one of the few relatives he could rely on to tell him the truth, and he had complete faith in her judgment. However, as his wife and companion, Camilla should not be devalued in the eyes of history, he had fought too hard for her. As far as he could tell, Anne was not trying to undermine Camilla, but rather to protect the traditions that she held dear. The mental toll it was taking on Camilla, the weight of knowing her role was still under scrutiny, was something he couldn't ignore. Disputes within the palace were probably going to be the extent of the matter. Continuity and the avoidance of personal issues becoming public spectacles have long been pillars of the monarchy. Underneath the immaculate facade, though, the issue remained. Many in Camilla's inner circle felt that the title of queen consort was superfluous, as she was already officially queen. Anne and her supporters argued that royal tradition should not be changed for pragmatic reasons, but rather preserved. We have reached the conclusion of today's video. In case you've stuck with us this far, you should definitely check out our other videos.